Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Closers Inner Circle podcast, hosted by your partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and together with my co-host, Ben Gay III, we are diving into the world of sales mastery with a genuine gem from the Closers Part 2. Now, these books, Parts 1 and 2, are widely known across the globe as the Sales Bibles. And today we dive into the highly anticipated discussion about sales infiltration, which is in chapter 257, I think. Yeah, 257 of the Closers Part 2. Now, if you haven't been paying any attention at all, and if you haven't, shame on you, Ben Gay is highly regarded as one of the top sales trainers in the world, and his teachings have positively impacted many careers and many businesses. So we are going to talk about how Ben is offering tactical advice that can greatly enhance your sales strategies and your outcomes. He's going to share those strategies for building a strong rapport with prospects and closing more deals. And his practical wisdom will give you a new perspective and a competitive edge. So whether you are experienced in sales or just starting out, this episode is sure to be full of valuable insights. So get ready to take notes and listen to Ben. So Ben, good morning. It's Wednesday.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on again. I appreciate that.
You're my co-host. I can't ignore you.
Well, you can't just throw me off. Well,
No.
I guess you could, but that wouldn't be polite.
Well, yeah, you know me, I'm just so darn polite all the time.
Yeah, as that word came out of my mouth, I thought you're talking to the wrong person here.
Yeah, yeah. So what?
The,
Go ahead and I'm sorry. Keep
well,
going.
I was just going to say, you said whether you're new to sales, whether you're experienced or new to sales. For those of you who are new to sales, what we're going to discuss today and probably in the next couple of weeks about sales infiltration will cut 15 to 20 years off your learning curve. I've been down the path. I saw what was going on. I know who's who, what's what, and where the bodies are buried. So I'm coming back up the path to tell you what's back there. And if someone had done that for me, it would have saved an enormous amount of time in my career. So I encourage you to listen up. This is, as I say to people who buy the whole Closers series, which I'm very proud of all of it. Closers Part 1 is the foundation. Closers Part 2 shows you what sophisticated people really do with that information. Closers Part 3 takes you inside actual sales and what's going on. Closers Part 4 is not out yet, but it's being written by Denise Griffitts as we speak.
It is.
And that's on podcasting, which has become an important part of the sales world. And then the Closers Part 5 takes you inside the mind of other great salespeople, sales trainers who know what's really going on. They're not just parroting what they heard somewhere else. So this could be if you've been with us for a while, hopefully it's all been valuable. But for those of you who are new or newer to the broadcast and to selling, this could be the moment that starts to turn it around for you. It did for me even before it's called sales infiltration. It did for me even before I gave it a name.
And I have to tell you, I told you last week that I had actually marked up one of my pages, which I never do. My librarian, when I was a kid, we lived in the library. I can just feel her and my mom thumping me in the back of the head when I did that. But then I opened it and I spent a lot of time on this particular chapter in sales infiltration. And I just realized that now my binding is shot. My pages are coming out. I have to get a bunch of scotch tape and put it back together.
Well, that's a good sign. I've gone into people's offices and they say, "Oh yeah, I love the Closers." And I say, "Well, let me see your copy." And they turn around and find it. They're not able to put their hands on it immediately, but
Right.
they look over the shelf and find it, and then they hand it to me. And when I open it, I'm the first person to ever crack the
Yeah.
spine.
Yeah. Well,
Dr. Hill used to say that about Think and Grow Rich all the time. he was in our living room one night, and there was a copy of Think and Grow Rich on the desk, and I said, on the coffee table, and I said, Dr. Hill, how does it feel to have written one of the world's best-selling books? He said, best-selling, least read. So
That and you've
it's one of
said
those
that
things.
to me before, and I always found that so sad.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things you feel like you ought to have. Same thing with How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Most people have one, but it's a showpiece. I clean out my library about every other year. I've given thousands of books to the local library, 5,000 at the first clean out, because I discovered that some of the books I'd never read or opened and didn't plan to, but they had become a trophy case of look how smart I am. There's all those books. And so I thought, well, if I'm not going to read them, maybe I ought to get them in the hands of somebody who will, and or I have read them, but I'm not going to read them again. So to stay in my office more than 2 years, you've got to be a book that I go back to and back to and back to. Think and Grow Rich is one. The closers, although I wrote most of them, I co-wrote, edited, or published the entire series. And How to Win Friends and Influence People and so on. And my quote books. Uh, Winston Churchill said, the uneducated man, and I certainly qualified for that, should read books of quotes, because usually to make it to a quote book, you have to be the best out of somebody's speech or somebody's book or what have you.
And
And
mostly dead.
yeah,
Yeah,
and,
most most great quotes come from people who are just no longer with us.
yeah. There's side story, but since we're all in a little family here where I share things that I don't generally share, there was a nice man in Denton, Texas, named Dr. Luther Brock. He billed himself as the letter doctor. Many of the quotes in sales and success that people quote and attribute to fill in the blank came from Dr. Luther Brock. I was first on the list. I was led to believe, maybe everybody was led to believe that, but he used to send around quotes. And as best I recall, this is 30, 35 or more years ago. You could pick the quote you wanted, send him $50 and mark it off the list. And then you were supposed to mail it on to the next person on the list and so on. And I found that many of us in the speaking business and writing business and so on have become far less profound since Dr. Brock died.
That makes sense. I think we've talked before about him and some of the quotes that you passed on and that have now become part of history, which is interesting. It's like,
Yeah, I
you
would.
recognize that, said I should have bought that, but Zig Ziglar took it. God darn it.
uh, who got them? I had first shot, so if I didn't get it and regret it, that's on me.
Right.
But he was a real wordsmith. I could write a perfect direct sales letter, I thought, and send it to him, and it would come back looking like it had been attacked by chickens. Crossing this off, and so on. He was just a master. But that came up because you said dead, and he is.
I know.
But he was a great guy and made a lot of us look smarter than we perhaps are.
I wonder if he knew. I mean, it's always sounded to me when you talk about him that this was just something that he did very naturally. It just came to him, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, he
in
spent most of his time writing books about how to write
oh,
direct
okay.
sales letters and so on. That was his specialty. And probably the other half of his time was tied up uh, marking up letters like he did for
Mhm.
me.
Gotcha.
And I had a dear friend, Ray Considine. You have his book, Weymouth.
I do.
And he said to me one day, he looked at a letter. I said, what do you think about this? And he said, well, I would tell you to run it by Luther Brock, but you already have. He could tell it was better than anything I would have written. That's how good he was. Without his name on it, without any reference to him not having been mentioned that day, he looked at it and said, "This has already been by Luther Brock." He did have a style. He made reading a direct mail letter sort of exciting.
Well, and my question was going to be, and I don't think I got it all the way out, was do you think towards the end of his life, if he sat and reflect about, his body of works, that he had any real notion of how impactful he had been?
Well, I would think so. That's always hard. Somebody sent me something this morning about how something I said in a seminar had changed their life, and they've taught thousands of other people the same lesson and so on. And I was thinking to myself, why don't I just go, thank you and let it go at that, because it was something that somebody else had told me, and I probably changed a word or two. But I'm slow to out people uh, who have been impactful, because somebody's whole life might be based around that. I
Uh,
have I have large sections of my life based around things that Earl Nightingale or Dr. Napoleon Hill or Zig or lots of other people taught me. And this is not the time to tell me that any of them were child molesters, or no good people or what have you. They've served their purpose in my life at the right time with the right phrase, as the old saying goes. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And they all appeared at the right time. Ogmandino all appeared at the right time in my life, and I'm very grateful for that. And knowing other people have that in their minds, uh, it's not time to tear it down, because you might inadvertently, disavow one statement and inadvertently tear down the belief system of somebody else. If it worked for you and you're happy you got the information, fantastic. I'll let it go at that, even if I know specifically that's not right. What they believe is right, where it came from, and maybe where that came from. I was thinking the other day, um, somebody wrote something and took credit for it, and I know where it came from, and it wasn't them. And then Gigi and I were talking. I said, "This drives me crazy sometimes. How hard would it have been to say, Ogmandino said, or Earl Nightingale said, or whatever?" It doesn't take anything away from you.
mhm.
Shows that you read.
Right. You're
And
knowledgeable.
yeah, and Gigi said, "Well, look at it this way. When you came out of the womb, you didn't know a single word, thing, or thought other than hunger and pain. So everything that you've ever said or thought came from somebody else since you got here." So she said, so you don't go nuts. You got to let some of it slide, because it's all borrowed. I've given you this quote before, forget where I read it, but it said, "After the Bible was finished and Shakespeare was dead, the rest of us have just been moving words around."
I'm not sure that wasn't Churchill. That sounds like something he would
Yeah, might have been.
who knows? But
It
I've
wasn't me.
and I have always said that there are no new thoughts. We're just all wandering around in this big cauldron of soup, picking out the little vegetables that we want to use. But there's
Absolutely.
really nothing new. It's how you present it. It's how you believe in it. It's how you sell it. One of the very first things that you ever told me was that Dr. Napoleon Hill told you to write it down, Ben. And
Yeah.
now every time I pick up a pen, because the thought is just about to flee right out of my brain, write it down, Denise. And
Yep.
my attitude is if it came from Napoleon Hill through Ben Gay, that's sacrosanct. I'm going to write it down.
I came to the office today off one of those small legal pads. I'm guessing it's 4 or 5 by 6 or 7 or something, but it looks just like a legal pad. I have them all over the place. When I came into the office this morning, and they're right here on my desk now, there were 4 pages of new ideas, reminders, thoughts. Some of them were mundane. Gigi's supposed to have lunch with somebody. next Tuesday. And I wrote that down because she'll get a note Monday night. Don't forget, so on. But most of them were pretty unique and new to me anyway, and important. And I'm thinking as I was flipping through them before I called you, I'm so glad I have this system. I could make a living off these 5 pages. And they were just notes, and none of them would have made it to the finish line if I hadn't written them down.
Exactly. And this is why people think I'm crazy. I'm not. Well, maybe kind of sort of depends. But when I'm in the shower and I take my showers hot enough to steam broccoli, seriously, I do. And that's when you and I have talked about this. This is when the great Godwinks just start filtering through from somewhere and they land in my brain. And if I don't get them written down, I'm in trouble because they're going to be gone. And sometimes the phrasing was just so perfect. But by the time I get out of there, grab a towel, run streaking literally through the house to get to my computer, it's gone. So I take bathtub crayons in the shower with me. And as soon as the fog clears, I take a picture of all these wonderful downloads and I've still got them. Then I transfer them onto a pad or, a Word document. They're there. They're gone. They're not gone until I get rid of them.
It's a very effective system. And I remember right where I was sitting, where Dr. Hill was sitting, my office door was open. I could see Marty Conley, my executive assistant, secretary, boss,
Us.
see her
I know.
sitting there. And he said, write that down. I said, I'll remember it. He said, no, you won't. Write it down. And I looked around. There was papers on my desk, but nothing that I should write a new note on. They were letters and so on. And he said, where's your memo pad? I said, well, I don't have one, but don't worry about that. He said, Marty, get Mr. Gay some memo pads, please. And in
He
came
knew who
my
was in
first packet.
charge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and you always had them everywhere. No matter where you turn, you've got those yellow pads.
yeah, from where I'm sitting, I can see three, and I can't see the whole office from here, and that doesn't count anything in the house beside the bed, beside my chair, in the bathroom, whatever. It's probably the most significant. I hate when somebody says, who do you love the most, or who's this, or what's your favorite all-time lesson, or so on. I'm always reluctant to name it because the answer could be any one of 500 things in any one of 500 categories. But among the great lessons was write it down and be prepared to write it down. I even have an old spiral memo pad in my hip pocket and a pen in my pocket at all times. And that's for when I'm away from a real memo pad in a restaurant. Something comes to me. I'm not good at names and I'm face blind. For instance, I was flipping through it the other day, and the first 4 or 5 pages were the names of the maitre d's, the bartenders, and the my favorite servers at 4 or 5 different restaurants. So when I go in there, I can just go, Chris, how are you? But I'm outside the restaurant flipping through pages
Right.
before I go in.
But it's a tool.
Yeah, yeah. You said something a moment ago about there's nothing new. It's one of my favorite quotes. I sent it to somebody this morning in response to something they had said, and it was from President Harry Truman, who said, the only thing new in the whole world is the history you don't know.
Yep.
It's already happened. Somebody wrote it down. Now it's happening again. And if you don't know what's going to happen and how this works, it's just because you don't know your history.
That's
Write
exactly
it down, get the books, highlight things. I know your librarian teacher would be
nope.
upset about that.
Sticky
Highlight your
notes.
books if you own them. Highlight your books, underline things, and so on, so they don't slip away.
And here's a problem that I noticed that I was having some time ago because you have your yellow pads, I have composite notebooks
Mhm.
everywhere. those composition notebooks,
Mm.
buck a piece, or they were at Dollar Tree. We talked about that last week. Now they're a dollar and a quarter. But I have them everywhere, and I'll write on, this one, this for social media for this month. This one is ideas for whatever it is I'm working on. I have another one that's talking about my book, the closers, and they're stacked very neatly so I can grab them and start scribbling. But all that to say, there was a time when I would just randomly write things down. So that is so good, Denise. That's so smart. Then I'd forget to read the darn thing.
Or what you wrote it on.
Yeah. So I had to develop a system. And part of that system is to pick up my current composition notebooks. Right now I have 5 on my desk, um, and go through them each morning before I begin my day.
They may determine your day.
They do. They
Yeah.
really do.
Well,
So,
let's
oh,
get
geez,
into
I
sales
forgot
and
about that. Okay, yeah. So let's go ahead and start because you have talked a lot about this chapter. We have mentioned it a lot in this podcast. So where do you want to go with it?
well, it's page 257 in the closers part 2. It's called Sales Infiltration. And I'll give you a little history on it. I was writing the closers part 2, and I was looking for a chapter to wrap it up. And I had had a conversation with one of my mentors, Merle Frazier, who was 12 years older, I'm guessing, than I am. And it gave me a lot of tips in the early days and guided me. He was sort of like a second father, great guy. And we had people like him had been a big influence in my life. And so I'm writing. He was one of the people who said to me, I really love the closers. And I was sending him drafts of the first chapters of the closers part 2. He said, I like all that. He said, but I've been watching you for a long time, Ben, and you do some of all of that. I've heard those words come out of your mouth, but that's not your real secret. Your real secret is something that Jimmy Rucker shared with you, maybe was part of the inspiration. Zig, when he was at his best, did it. Give some thought about that. And then he reminded me of the old quote Cary Grant said, the old actor. Um, the secret of acting is not to get caught at it. And I added on to that, and that's the secret of selling too. And sales infiltration shows you how not to get caught at it and get those problems that arise in almost any sales presentation of significance out of the way first. So I'm sitting in the office. I wrote, for some reason, I don't really recall why I wrote the closers part 2 on legal pads by hand and then sent them off to be typed up and then re-edited. So I'm sitting there with a legal pad, and the page has been blank for most of the day. I do other things and come back and nothing. And this guy came into the office. He had a tool belt on. He knocked on the door, and I said, come in, or buzzed him in or something. And he walked in. He said, "Hi, my name is so and so, and you must be Mr. Gay." And I said, "Yes, I am. Call me Ben." And he said, "I'm here to work on your filtration system." And I paused for a second. He must have thought I'd had a stroke. And then I stood up and I said, "I really hate to do this to you. I know you work on a tight schedule, but I need to be alone for a while. You just wrapped up my last book for me." And he said, "What was that?" And I said, "Filtration. I'll explain it to you later." Because from filtration, he was an air conditioning guy. I thought of infiltration,
Mhm.
and that was the secret that most of us who've been really good at selling, whether they've ever heard that term or not, whether they consciously know what they're doing or not, that's what they're doing. Jimmy Rucker was a better salesman than I am. He's retired now, but he was my running buddy through high school and into college. And we both worked for my father, and then we went into business together and remain friends to this day. So we're coming up on, he sent me a note the other day. He said, "Did you know that 60 years ago today, we were in the Coast Guard?" we we went into the Coast Guard on the buddy system, and so he's been around forever. But the best salesman I've ever personally worked with. But he was not a good sales trainer. And the reason was he was an unconscious competent. He didn't know what he knew. He couldn't put it into words and explain it to other people. His idea of training was he'd tell people, well, just watch what I do and do that. And I thought, well, that cuts down the training session. We don't have to spend a lot of time. That's probably 20 seconds or less. But people generally need a little more help than that. And Rucker's secret, Zig was not a great closer, in spite of the fact he wrote books on closing and was famous for it. Zig was the front man for a two-man partnership. Mel Lanius was his partner, and Mel was a stone cold killer when it came to closing. Zig was a stone cold speaker from the front of the room. Everybody loved Zig. And if he sat down, he closed his share of sales and so on, mainly because of who he was, and they just watched him for an hour. But he wasn't a technical closer. He he was a sales infiltrator without the knowledge backup. And I don't mean he didn't understand selling. He certainly did. He promoted himself very well. But that isn't the stuff he wrote in his books. Like a lot of the stuff in the Closers Part 1 isn't really what I do. It's good to know it, to have his backup. It's like Lombardi used to start every football season in college, and then at Green Bay, and then at Washington, where he ended his career. He would walk to the front of the room day one, in front of this new group of people, hold up a football and say, gentlemen, this is a football. And he said, I start from there. I don't want to leave anybody behind,
Oh,
just in case they got to the pros and don't know what a football is.
oh my
So
God.
he went back to basics. And as a result, I had the entire Washington Redskins team knock on the door one night when we were doing an encounter seminar at Ricky's Hyatt House in Palo Alto, California. It was a 4-day class, started Thursday morning, ran nonstop to Sunday afternoon. And except for going to the bathroom, you didn't leave the room, and you ate what we put in front of you, which was generally K rations. So
Ow.
just knock on the door, and I opened the door, and I almost couldn't see out because the door was blocked with this huge, I used to know his name, I can't think of it now, with this huge guy backed up by other huge guys. And I said, yes. It was sort of shocking because everybody at Ricky's house said, leave them alone. Don't go near the door. Just leave them alone. And I said, yeah, how can I help you? He said, well, I'm so-and-so with the Washington Redskins. Vince Lombardi died last year, as you know. And we heard the commotion coming out of the room and some of the yelling and screaming and running on the parking lot. We let them out to do that, run around the parking lot in the middle of the night and come back in. And we all realized how much we missed Vince. And can we come in for a while? And the entire Washington Redskins team filled up what little was left of this conference room just to hear Vince Lombardi. And they didn't know the term sales infiltrator yet. And I didn't know it yet. I hadn't met the air conditioning guy. But what they were talking about was Vince had the ability to get inside them. He and Bear Bryant at the University of Alabama shared a thing, is that their challenge at the beginning of every year was to take 40 disparate men, build them into a unit that operated with one set of lungs and one heartbeat. And they did that through sales infiltration, although I repeat, they didn't know the name at the time. It's the same technique. Part of the reason I got excited when this gentleman said to me, the filtration unit, was I was raised a Southern gentleman. If I'm in your house trying to sell you something, or I'm in your office trying to sell you something, and you say to me, get out, or no, thank you, I've heard enough. Not a chance in the world I'm going to buy it. And I've heard that a few times, about 14,000 times as best I can figure. I figure I've made about 100,000 face-to-face, in-person sales presentation. I have an 86% closing rate, and people go, wow, that's wonderful. I said, yeah, but don't you think about the 14,000 people who listened to me and said no? So I went to work on trying to cut back on that get out of the house stuff. Because as a Southern gentleman, if you tell me to get out of your home or office, I'm gone.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
my trick is to make sure you don't tell me to get out of your office. Kirby Vacuum Cleaner, I've done work with them over the years. I've told you this. They have a theory. I have argued with them, but I think it's sort of cute. They said the sales presentation is not over until you have payment in your hand or the police have been called. So I don't,
Every time you tell me that story, I laugh for the better part of the day. That's just one of the funniest things, and it's true.
yeah. Well, I never really wanted to have the police called on me. So I figured there must be a better way, including sales infiltration covers this, including giving them a trap door in the beginning. I'm going to go through this presentation with you. You're the customer. I'm the salesperson. You know that. I know that. I know you're going to come up with excuses to stall. You think I'm a liar, cheat, and thief. I got it. We'll start at that point. But I really do have something of value to you, and I would much rather have a firm yes when I'm through or a firm no. I don't want to hear maybe. I'll think it over. I got to check with my brother-in-law, who's an attorney in Milwaukee, etc. Uh, I got the appeal to a higher authority. If it's a man, I've got to talk to my wife. We have somebody coming to give an estimate on one of our rental properties for something on Friday. And Gigi said, you open on Friday? I said, I'm not going to be there. You listen to the presentation, you make notes, and then you can't make a decision because your higher authority, your husband, is not there. And
See,
I
I would
guarantee,
not
I
want to have to
guarantee,
tell
yeah,
you something. I just, I would just say, Ben, I really like you. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Because we're not going to talk about sales. I'm just done here. You scared me,
no, the higher authority excuse is good, but I cover that with them up front.
right?
Get all those things in up front, and then 30 minutes later, 40 minutes later, when they say, I've got to check with my brother in Cleveland who's an attorney, I go, we promise not to do that to each other. Remember when you agreed to be straight, I'll be straight with you, you be straight with me. So if it's no, tell me no. If you've got a sincere, semi-intelligent question, ask it. And if I know it, I'll tell you. If not, I'll tell you, I'll get you the answer, probably by phone before I leave this office. But let's be straight with each other. And that's part of sales infiltration. You become friends with them first. There's a phrase I coined years ago, and Rob Anspach recently helped me. He's very active on the internet, consultant, writer, coach, etc. I was talking to him. I said, well, I think he'd mentioned it earlier. I said, the phrase,
We all
people
know it. You
like
do
to,
business with people you know, like, and trust.
right, people like to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And he said, and with whom they feel safe.
Right.
And I said, oh, that's good. And wrote it on my memo pad, sitting right next to the computer where I was when he said it. And it's now part of the phrase. So you can learn from everybody anywhere, but the first trick is people say, you're selling a high priced vacuum cleaner. How do you do that? I said, well, first of all, I don't sell it because it's high priced. I sell it because it's a quality product that I believe in, that's fairly priced. Doesn't have to be the cheapest, shouldn't be the most expensive just because you can get away with it. And I spend my time talking to qualified people. But the real secret to selling high priced vacuum cleaners or Rolls Royces or luxury anything or a fine suit is to first sell yourself. Uh, so that when I say I, Ben Gay, endorse this product, it means something. We have the seal of approval, the National Association of Professional Salespeople. I hand that out. You have it. I hand that out slowly and carefully. But
I
I
was
want people,
shocked, by the way.
beg your
I was,
pardon?
I was shocked. I was like, why me? I'm not a
Because I
salesperson.
watched you.
And then you
Oh,
gave me a dressing down. I said, okay, thank you.
but when that seal goes on something or my endorsement goes on something, I make sure that it means something. They already know, like, trust me, they feel safe with me, and therefore the endorsement means something. And that's all part of sales infiltration. And then you go into the product. And then the product, one of the first parts in sales infiltration was taught to me by J. Douglas Edwards, for whom I wrote Sales Closing Power after he died. He never wrote a book for some reason. But he had several phrases that meant so much to me in my early development. Among them, when you have a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it. So if price is your objection, I've told you this one, use this example, it's one of my favorites. When I was working with British Motors in San Francisco, they sold Rolls Royces and Bentleys and other high-priced cars. Uh, the opening line that I had them memorize and learn to deliver gracefully was hand them your business card and then say, hi, I'm Ben Gay. And before we get started, let me tell you what a pleasure it is to work with successful people. I learned so much from you people uh, because anyone who can afford the prices have changed over the years, but I'll pretend like it's today's price for the starter kit. Anyone who can invest $350,000 in a car knows something I don't know, and I want to learn it. So I'll teach you about Rolls Royce today, and you teach me over time because we're going to become friends starting today. You teach me over time how you got in a position where this is a sound investment for you. And by the way, notice I said invest in a
Investment.
Rolls Royce,
Oh,
not
I
buy
got
a,
it. Yep,
yeah,
I
not
got
buy
that.
one. So since the number one objection to buying a Rolls Royce is price. Many people who are buying Rolls Royces, their car isn't worth that much. Pardon me, their house isn't worth that much. It's a significant investment, percentage wise and dollar wise, and so on. So if price is going to be one of their problems, let's get it out of the way right up front. It is, if they say $350,000 and vomit in the back of their mouth, are you kidding me? That's more than I paid for my house. I don't have 350,000. Well, listen, look around. You might see something that inspires you for the future. I'm so glad you came in. If you have any questions, you have my business card. Even if I'm out of sight, just dial my cell phone number and I'll answer it for you. Have a great day. I just said, people say, well, you blew off a sale. No, I
Mm-mm.
saved an hour and a half of my life.
That's exactly right. And if they come in and they're just, I don't know what you call it, they're kind of like the old granny maid who walks along and puts your finger on your windowsill and comes up with dust. If
Yeah,
they're if they're just there to looky-loo, you need to know that right away because you're never going to sell them, but you don't need to insult them either. They may have a brother-in-law who really can't afford it and he'll try
right.
to come in.
And their referrals are
Go ahead.
priceless because
Right.
somebody who comes to you through marketing, whether it's an ad or a referral from somebody they know, like, and trust, is much easier to sell than someone who comes in cold or even answered your ad. People say, well, what's the most important, sales or marketing? I say both. No, you got to pick one. No, I don't have to pick one. Marketing gives to us closers someone to close, and they come at you in a different frame of mind if they've been sent than if you've approached them. Let me I'll just flip to open the page to 258, this second page after we started this thing, in case people are, when I looked up infiltrate after the guy said filtration to me, here's what I found in the dictionary. What the word infiltrate means, quote, to cause as a liquid to permeate something by penetrating its pores, to pass through or into a substance by filtering or permeating, to pass troops singly or in small groups through gaps in the enemy line, to enter and become established in gradually and unobtrusively for subversive purposes. I'm frankly surprised I quoted that directly at the end because it's not necessary. That's the definition of infiltrate, but it's not the definition in selling. It's to get inside, to go from team A, the customer who distrusts the salesperson, and team B, the salesperson who starts off with a reputation of being a liar, cheat, and thief, to team C, where you're 50-50 partners working on a problem we've agreed on to solve it. And once you've got that going, you're off and running. When I started the National Communication Center, which is coming up on 48 years ago, it was the beginning of the toll-free uh, call center business worldwide. There'd never been one. We started at about 10 miles from where I'm sitting right now in a little town of Cameron Park, California. And I already had a reputation for having a high closing rate. I don't know if I'd figured out it was 86% yet, but it was high and everybody knew it. And I was somewhat astounded rather quickly to discover that little housewives who just wanted a part-time job came in, got half an hour of training, was stuck on the phone. Our requirement was that you can read and write reasonable English and that you sounded decent on the phone. That was grand total. Because when somebody called in and asked operator 14, you reached in front, but this is before we had a computer on everybody's desk. You reached in front of you to this big manual. It looked like a Sears catalog on a stand. You flipped to the 14th page, operator 14, and said, "This is operator 14. I've been asked to take your name, address, phone number, credit card number, so we can get this product right off to you. What's your first name?" Boom, boom, boom. And so on. It was semi-ingenious. Thank you very much. Uh, but I really didn't know it was going to work at the time. I'll tell you something, make a note so I don't forget to tell you clear. Okay. It had some modifications over the years, but what was amazing to me was that these sweet little ladies, primarily, we had some men, sweet little ladies, their closing rate was 100%. I knew mine was high. I didn't know what it was. I did know for a fact it wasn't 100%. Well, the difference was incoming
Marketing.
mark, marketing. Yeah,
Exactly. They were marketed to, they were warm market, they were ready to buy. Nothing had to be sold.
absolutely. So they came in the door. They'd been pushed into the chute. We had 1,500 corporate clients. They'd been pushed into the chute by somebody. Some ads were good, some ads were bad, some products were probably good, some products were probably questionable. It wasn't my job to decide all that. We were selling accounts, answering service accounts, and they paid by the number of messages or orders we took. But they had 100, there might have been somebody who hung up, I'm not aware of it, but they had virtually 100% closing rate because the people were coming at them down the chute, having been put in it by marketing. So that's a big part of this. And when you're making a cold call, you sort of have to do your marketing yourself at the time of the sale. In other
Yeah,
words, all
you
those
really
things
did.
didn't happen to you that should have to make the phone ring. I'm going
No,
to
it
have to
wasn't
do
lined up, so all you had to do was show up and take the order.
right. But now I'm going to be able to set up my own marketing thing, put you in the chute and shove you down, then run around to the other end of the chute, and suddenly I'm a salesperson. I was a
Oh,
marketing person when I sold you on Ben Gay, and a
right.
marketing person when I warmed you up to the product. Now run down to the other end of the chute. So it's marketing and salesmanship. I said I was going to write something down, and I'm fortunate I did because I would not have remembered it. My favorite place in that business was to come down from my big fancy office on the second floor and sit down, put on a headset and take calls and be on the floor with, they weren't all there at once, but we had 150 telephone reps, and to be among them, or that share that was there at that time. I think the floor would hold 75 or 80 desk cubes. So to be among them, it was just so exciting. I used to love to be at the office at 5 o'clock in the morning. They'd be sitting in there having coffee, talking to one another, hardly anything going on. And at 5 a.m. Pacific time, it looked like a Christmas tree came on because the East Coast had awakened
Oh,
and
gotcha.
started checking for messages, seeing if they had any orders, whatever. And it would go from dead silence to kaboom all at once. I was at the Cameron Park Country Club down there one day having lunch, and somebody came in and said, "Mr. Gay, your office called. You need to get back there. Something has gone wrong." Well, what had gone wrong was we had 4 or 5 Elvis Presley product sellers, dial this number to get his records, dial this number to get a scarf just like he wore in Las Vegas, whatever. Elvis had died,
Oh,
and it almost blew out. And that was in 1976. It almost blew out the phone lines between Sacramento, the nearest semi big town to us, and Cameron Park. They'd never had a load like that. And there was never a time for a couple of days when, if you were in that office working, you weren't talking to somebody. Because as soon as you hit disconnect, the predictive call dialer says you have another call. And it went on for their entire shift, 3 shifts a day for at least 3 days, and then for months afterwards, uh, to a somewhat lesser degree. But what I learned, here's another little lesson. It has nothing to do with sales infiltration, but here's what I've learned is get out among them. I think there's a phrase, management by walking around. You can learn more for being with your people, and especially a new person who walks in and they're not indoctrinated to that's the way we've always done it. Uh, they uh, they don't know. I'm not going to bore you with it right now, but a guy
keep going.
joined our packing department, and he'd been there about a half a day. And I walked in. They said, "Bobby, this is Ben Gay." I said, "Oh, hi, good to meet you. Welcome to the team." He said, "Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here, sir. I've heard good things about your company. Would you mind if I ask you about something?" And I thought, "Uh-oh, here we go." And it was about how much tape we put on a package and how much time we spent trying to cut down on the amount of tape that went over the label. And he said, I've just been here a little while, but I've been noticing they try and line up the tape from one side of the label, line it up from the other, hopefully so it'll go together and you won't have to use a third piece of tape. But I've noticed that over half the time, they do need a third piece of tape because it's hard to do that. So might I suggest we put one down the middle, that's that 4-inch wide tape, I'm guessing clear packing tape, put one down the middle. That takes the pressure out of making the other two line up. Because it
Right.
takes two if you're perfect, three if you're a normal human. And I said, yeah, but I think they were trying to save tape. He said, how much does tape cost? His point was, the amount we were saving on the rare occasion when we got it right
As
was,
opposed to the labor cost.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was probably uh, less than a quarter of a cent for that length of tape, probably not even that much. But that was a new guy walked in and said to himself, that's stupid. Why are they doing that? Anyway,
Yeah.
so I picked up one of those by sitting in the booth one day with my headset on. Sometimes I would do it and pretend like I was plugged in and taking phone calls. But what I was really there was listening to the telephone reps on the floor, see what they were encountering, uh, and so on. And one of the things I picked up rather quickly, might even been the reason I was in there that day, we were having a high dropout rate with message accounts. Those were people that, you dial this 800 number, everybody dial one number, uh, whether you're running a big ad or you had a single message account, everybody dialed 800-824-7888. We took up to, I think, peaked out at about 86,000 phone calls a day on that number, which I still have. And I still get three or four, it rings in my cell phone now. I still get 3 or 4 calls a day. And it's somebody looking at an old magazine, generally an older man, and he wants to order something that goes into his woodworking shop or to fix his 56 Chevrolet, whatever.
Oh,
And so they still trickle in after all these years. The business has been closed 40 years, I think, or something like that. So anyway, I'm listening to him, and a guy calls in for his messages. And you either have one or you don't. With an order, you have 5 or 500, but at least you have some on almost every account. But a guy, he's out on the road, he or she, I should be saying, I still think male, by himself, alone on the road. He's tired, he's been beaten up. He wishes he was home with his family. And he calls in and said, "This is so and so, account number M, whatever. Do I have any messages?" And we were saying to him, "No, sir, you don't have any messages." And we also were having a much higher attrition rate than I had planned when I designed the business. And I was trying to figure out, why are, whatever it was, why are half the people leaving us rather quickly if they have a message service account? And I came up with a phrase. Person calls in, "This is Bob Zwicky, account M24. Do I have any messages?" Pause while she checked. "No, sir, you're all clear." And the attrition rate went away. Having no messages became good news.
well, and that makes sense because if you're just told you're tired, you're crabby, everything you described, and you're so, nope, no messages. Oh, great, I just failed again. Wonderful.
Exactly.
But if you hear, nope, you're all clear, it's like, oh, right, and I'm going to go have a beer, right?
Don't have to deal with that. And
Yeah.
Gigi and I use that. She wasn't with me. I knew her socially back then, but she wasn't with me in the business, and we weren't romantically engaged. But to this day, she generally gets to the actual physical office before I do. I wake up at 4:30, turn on the phone, and start working from bed. Uh, and But she goes to the office because she does orders in her jewelry business and handles our book orders and so on. And a couple of times when we were first together and had the office wing on our house, she said, I said, "Anything going on up there?" She said, "No, no orders." I said, "No, no, sit down." And I had her sit on the edge of the bed. I said, "Let me tell you how you break bad news to me." She said, "How's that?" And I say, "Nope, we're all clear."
Okay.
And to that, I made it up. And to that, I go, "Good. It's not good." It means no one during the night called in and spontaneously ordered a book on their own. But it sounds fantastic because I'm thinking, okay, uh, there's less stuff that we have to pack. There's less stuff that we have to take to the post office. And she said, then she'll say, "But we will. So
There you go.
stand by."
Yeah,
So, but you're all clear,
you're all
sir.
clear. I love
Hey,
that.
yeah, it saved a business. I'm not sure the National Communications Center would have made it and created the industry it's created if You're All Clear hadn't been created, because we were slowly going down the toilet.
But it's an attitude, and it's a hopeful attitude.
Yep.
So that makes sense. And you talk about, you wrote something down, I wrote down too. I wanted to circle back to, I don't know, we're both so raspy today. Couple of things. I wanted to go back to the Washington Redskins because that's a story you have not shared with me, and I'm fascinated by it. So I'm picturing these giant guys coming in and listening and, just kind of reflecting on their time with their coach who they dearly loved. What kind of information or tips or tricks or great stories did y'all learn from them? Because I'm sure there was some milling around.
Yeah, we didn't, they understood they were in the middle of an intense encounter seminar. So they were very polite and didn't butt in. But I was such a great Lombardi fan. I don't follow football, but to this day, when they pop sports up on the television screen, I want to know how Green Bay did. I don't know a single player on their team now. I don't know who the coach is, but Green Bay is sunk in my mind. And Lombardi had a very similar, I probably learned a lot of it from Lombardi, but we had a very similar teaching approach. Gentlemen, this is a football. Winning isn't the most important thing, it's the only thing. And we could debate the subtleties and fine points of that, but it was an attitude, can do attitude. There's Lombardi time. Lombardi time is a meeting is at 10 a.m. in the morning, and you're not there by 9:50 a.m. You're late. So yeah. Lombardi at times didn't wear a watch. I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but he didn't wear a watch because he said, "I'll be there early, and the meeting doesn't start till I'm there."
Right.
So he didn't need it. He was his own watch. If I walk in the room, the meeting is started. But he would start meetings. He'd walk in at 10 till 10 or whatever, and he'd start the meeting. And the stories were others of us were glancing in the room and realizing that Paul wasn't there, Sammy wasn't there, and so on. But we quickly learned they should have been. So he inspired them. He made them want to be good for him, also for themselves and their family. But they said, you wake up in the morning, and this is the Washington Redskins talking. This isn't in his heyday with Green Bay from Wisconsin. But he said, when you woke up in the morning, your first thought was football, Vince Lombardi, and how can I please him today, make him proud of me? And among the things they said was sucking up to him didn't work.
No, I wouldn't think so.
He
No.
wanted to, how many tackles did you make today? How many
Yeah.
catches did you make today? How many, if real game, how many points did you score today? And so on. He was result oriented.
He
And,
was my very dear friend, you know who he is, Jim Tunney, the
mhm.
of NFL referees, and he has told me some tremendous stories about Vince Lombardi and Og Mandino and Coach Wooden. He loved him. There's just and so many of these, and I'm not a sports person at all. I'm
I'm,
just,
I'm not either.
but I'll tell you what, some of the quotes that came out of these guys, you just wonder where the heck did that strength and that observation come from?
Well, I don't know where it came from, but that's the reason they were the leader of that
Right.
organization. It was buried in there, and the quotes became famous after they put those things into action. And I remember there was a guy, great big guy, I want to say Lou, but I'm probably wrong. And he came in on crutches because his foot had been broken or his ankle had been broken, and he had a big cast on it. And I said, and they were out there for a game in California. I don't know who they were playing, but they were there for a game. And I said, why'd you make the trip? He said, because Lombardi was our coach. He just died. He said, because Lombardi was our coach. If you have a game, he said, I show up for all practices. The fact your foot is shattered doesn't change anything. You still have your team responsibilities. you still can learn something. I can make the argument you can probably sit on the sidelines and learn more about what's really going on in a game than you can in the game when it's just you and whoever you're supposed to be blocking.
Right. And that
The,
makes sense because you're able to watch, observe, listen, just kind of soak it all in.
well, I knew people through being raised in the South. My dad was from Alabama. I knew people who played for Coach Bear Bryant, and then I met the people that worked for Vince in two places, Green Bay and Washington. And I have a tough time if I go to tell a story about either Bear Bryant or Lombardi. I make sure that I got the right coach because it sounds like the same person talking, the same drive. Joe Namath played for Bear Bryant. I guess at Alabama, Bear coached two different places. I forget where Namath played in college, but they said, uh, did you fear the games? He said, oh, the games were nothing. It was practice with Bear Bryant.
Ah,
That was the hardest part. He said the game was like the day off.
they were
So,
prepared.
yeah,
They knew what they were getting into.
yeah. And leading by example, nobody that I've ever met that worked with either one of them had any bad stories to tell about them. And, it was, yeah, well, behind the scenes, he was a drunk, or behind the scenes, he was a no good so and so. It reminds me of what I was taught and still do when I leave the house if I'm home going to a business meeting. If I leave the hotel room on the way down to the seminar floor to give a speech or whatever, I pull back my shoulders and I say to myself out loud, but to myself, I'm usually the only one there, it's showtime. And I suspect that Lombardi and Bear Bryant and the other greats did stuff like that. Wooden probably, because he's legendary and his people loved him. It's showtime. I'm out in public now. I'm a salesman of victory. I'm a salesman of attempted perfection, etc. Let's not show them anything that's less than that. The first time Bear Bryant played, and I'm such a not a sports nut, but played in one of the dome stadiums. I think it was in New Orleans at the Superdome or wherever the Superdome is. Anyway, he was famous for his houndstooth cap.
Even
Houndstooth.
I know that.
Even you know
I
that.
do.
Well, he walked on the field without it one day to a game. First time he played in that stadium. And I said, Coach, you forgot your hat. And he pointed up at the ceiling. He said, my mama wouldn't allow me to wear a hat indoors. I
Ah,
mean, is that getting down to the small stuff or what?
yeah, but these are the things that you're taught and you remember them. And I get that. And, you're talking about Vince Lombardi, and, I think it's probably proper to call him one of the greatest coach to ever lead a football team. But one of his contemporaries who was, died not all that long ago was my friend Jim Tunney. His best friend was Don Shula. He was
Uh,
kind of in that same arena, I think.
mhm.
So, and I'll tell you, he was a rascal.
I
I mean,
don't know anything about him
I
personally,
I only
just
know what
on the
Jim
field.
told
And
me. Yeah, and the stories are hilarious. They really are.
I
Nothing
just,
bad, but just, you didn't mess with him. You
it,
just did not get in his face.
it's like Brady now, or until recently, and maybe he's going to be stupid and come back again.
Oh,
But,
geez.
but when you watch him on television and they had the close up on his face, when his eyes took on a certain stare and glare, for lack of a better word, I knew he was going to throw the ball and hit his target. There was a look all the greats had on their face when the target, their receiver, was where he was supposed to be, running at the speed he was supposed to be, and they were locked in. I go, there
Right.
we go. Now we're just down to, does somebody tackle him after he gets the ball? There was a little question. that he was going to hit the ball. That concentration, which with sales infiltration and great football coaches and great players, uh, that's another thing, the ability to focus on one
Yeah,
thing. Concentration.
exactly.
Dr. Hill used to say to me all the time, focus, man, focus, when he'd see me looking up or my head spinning around because of some distraction when I was supposed to be writing something. And
Right.
he'd catch that distraction. Focus, Ben, focus. And I think of things like that when I watch the greats, whatever their profession, there's a focus. I go to an ear doctor because I wear hearing aids. I go to an ear doctor and I love it. I'm blessed with 3 or 4 different doctors, my general physician and so on. But one thing they all share is the concentration. They actually listen to me. They stare in my eyes. Oh, and another cute thing, because I'm very positive and upbeat, I could go with a bleeding ulcer and they'd say, how are you? I sound fine. Gigi goes in with me to the examination room and they all understand that now. In the beginning, they say, and you're here, why? Oh, I'm his wife and I want to make sure he tells you the truth. The last time
I
I
love
was at
her.
one of the doctors, I walked in and I was sitting on the exam table. He came in, he looked around, he says, where's Gigi? And I said, she stopped to talk to somebody. He said, okay, we'll wait.
You should have said she sent a note.
She said I could be here by myself.
Exactly right. But going back just because we're going to run out of time, we always do this, but going back to Tom Brady and that look and that focus, I always term that the 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah,
You are so focused, nothing is going to get in your way. You're right. You have looked at the target, you have honed in on the target, and you're going to get the target.
no. And there is nothing when that look comes across their face, there's nothing between them and the target.
Right.
No one's ever going to rush in and bat it down at the last second. They already put that in their thinking. When that
Yeah.
look comes over their face, the target is open.
Right.
And that
It's
goes back to
amazing.
focus, and we must do it. Sales
Yeah.
infiltrators,
Yeah.
salespeople in general, you must do it.
You have to do it right. And that we're going to go into that again because we're going to probably, like you said earlier, cover this particular chapter in a little bit more depth, maybe 1 or 2 more times, just whatever it takes. But what I'm taking away from this is that sales infiltration means that you're paying attention, you're listening, you're watching, you're observing, and you're doing everything you can not to just sell, but to make sure that you are selling. And you've said this to me many, many times, the best, whatever it is, widget, vacuum
Mm-hmm.
cleaner, hot, whatever it is, the best at a reasonable price, and it has your backing. But without that, you got nothing.
Yeah, and my personal guarantee.
Right.
The company
Right.
has guarantees, the manufacturer has guarantees, but here's my guarantee. Dial that cell phone number on the back of my business card and I will handle it. It's the only call you have to make.
Exactly. Okay, Ben, we are really running out of time. So we've already decided we're going to continue on with sales infiltration. So before I let you go, tell people where they can find you, your mentoring program. I think you're closed right now. I think you're filled up. And of course, where can they find the sales Bibles, the closers?
Well, the mentoring program is filled up currently, but that will change. People retire, people pass away, etc. But if you want to get on that list or on my mailing list, so when there is an opening, you'll know about it, just email me. B is in Ben, F is in Frank, G is in Gay, the numeral 3, BFG3 at DirectCon, short for Direct Connect, DirectCon.net. And I'd just be happy to hear from you anyway. It's a great way to submit questions for our show for this one. Just send them in and you'll hear them on the air. And if it's just to say hello and get in contact, love to do that. And then to get the closers series, one book or all of them, go to, this is where you get free shipping, lifetime, unconditional, no questions asked, money back guarantee, and better pricing than I offer at my own website. Go to stores, stores dot ebay.com/ all one word, Ronzoni Books, RONZONEBOOKS. Order by noon Pacific time, that's California. It'll go out that day and you'll have it in just a few days. Love to hear from you.
Good enough. Well, listen, everybody, I am, I don't even know how to pronounce it, super busy. I'm really busy working on just about everything podcasting has been mentioned. I'm working on a book. I'm so excited about that. I'm mentoring people who want to know more about podcasting, no matter where they are in their journey. They're brand new or their podcast has hit a curb. It's not going anywhere. Whatever you need to know about podcasting. I've been doing this for 16 years. So, and I'll say it again, my podcast is now old enough to drive. She's elderly. So I know a bit about podcasting. Just give me a call. I'll see if I can help you or, try to route you to somebody who can, or maybe give you some information, whatever you need. So call me toll free, 888-719-6711. Again, that is 888-719-6711. And just leave a message. It doesn't ring here in my office. You'll have to leave a message and I will return your call just as soon as possible. So thank you everyone for joining us, and be sure to find us on your partnerinsuccessradio.com. Just look for our names and or the Closers Inner Circle podcast, which is where this podcast with Ben and I is hosted. And honestly, you can't throw a stick on the internet without hitting us. So find us, ask questions, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Ben, thank you.
Thank you, Denise. As you know, Gigi and I love you and respect you, and I'm so happy to be working with you.